Here at Locked On NHL, we ranked some previous cup winners, and there's a little bit of slander going on in the rankings. We're going to talk about that, who's too high, who's too low, and who should be honorable mentions on today's Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On NHL, Thursday edition. I am Jay Forster, host of Locked On Blue Jackets. With me is Hunter Hodies, host of Locked On Penguins. He's taken a quick break from talking about Erik Karlsson to come and talk about some previous Stanley Cup winners. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On NHL is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube and SiriusXM. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL, and you're going to get a free white tech hat with any order. You're not going to want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. Let's just get straight into it, Hunter. We ranked I believe every Stanley Cup win since the 2005 lockout, I believe. And there were some rankings here that made sense and a whole lot that didn't. So I'm going to start off with one that I think is very egregious. And I do think partially this is, by the way, I think it's a lot of recency bias, or not necessarily recency bias, but I think it's a lot of people don't remember these teams as much because they happened, a decade or more ago. I'm just going to throw up the teams on the screen real quick, and then we'll get into them. So I know that Twitter only saw the top 10. We actually ranked the 18. So I want to talk about number 16 here, Hunter. The 2012 Los Angeles Kings were ranked 16th. That feels wild to me, considering what they did, because that team was just a lot of it was Jonathan Quick, in fairness, who decided he was going to win a Stanley Cup and they could come along if they wanted to. But I think people forget just how bonkers good that team was on the way to the playoffs. Oh, on the way to a Stanley Cup, excuse me.
They steamrolled everyone that year. They absolutely rolled through the Western Conference. If I recall correctly, they finished with a Stanley Cup playoffs record of 16-4. They barely lost. So. The only team that really gave them a little bit of a fit was the Devils in the final, and barely even then. They steamrolled them as well. They did not have a close series at all. And they came in as a number 8 seed. They just absolutely kicked butt and took names there, honestly. And you said it best. Jonathan Quick said, I'm not going to go home, and I'm going to lead this team to a Stanley Cup. And Drew Doughty was awesome. Kopitar was also great. Dustin Brown, that's why I think everyone started to realize that Dustin Brown was one of the more underrated players in the league at that time. He was awesome for the Kings during that run, but just that team was so deep. Their defense was good. They were well coached. It was a typical Daryl Sutter team, to be honest. And when Quick is playing like that, they were not going to win. The fact that they were ranked number 16 there is just a joke, to be honest.
Yeah, I genuinely think it is just that people forget. I was thinking about it and I was like, and then I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, this is one of in my mind anyway, this is one of the top 3, maybe top 5 cup winning teams in the last, was it 18 years that we did? Jonathan Quick had a 946 save percentage in the playoffs that year, by the way. They did go 16-4. He allowed 29 goals in 20 games. He had 3 shutouts, just truly bonkers stats. How about we talk about another team, that is way, way lower. Let's talk about the 2008 Detroit Red Wings, who somehow made it all the way down to 6th.
The fact that that team is at number 6 is disgraceful. I'm sorry. I will say that on this show. That is disgraceful. I remember that series, the Penguins-Red Wings series in 2008, like it was yesterday. I know I was only 10 years old at the time. I was going to be turning 11 that year. But that team was so freaking good. I was stunned the Penguins even took 2 games off of them. And remember, Penguins were less than a minute away from going home in Game 5. They scored the tying goal with less than a minute left before winning it in triple overtime to send it back to Pittsburgh. Peter Sikora was the one who called his shot, sent it back to Pittsburgh. Then the Penguins lost. Miriam Hossa, if you remember, Jay, inches away from sending that game to overtime in the final seconds. But that team was loaded. Prime Pavel Datsyuk, prime Henrik Zennerberg, Nicholas Lidstrom, who is the greatest defenseman I've ever watched in my life. You had Nick Cronwall, who can lay the boom. Chris Osgood was playing well that year. You had Danny Cleary. You had Tomas Holmstrom, who is, I think, the best net front presence I've ever watched. Patrick Hornquist was right there too, but Holmstrom was awesome. You had Valtteri Filppula when he was still really good. You had Chris Draper, who was on that team. Chris Chelios was there. Justin Abdelkader. Brian Rafalski, who I think is probably one of the most underrated defensemen of this generation. He was incredible. That team was so good. And they ran through the league and they're ranked number 6 on this list. I don't understand that. I mean, again, the Penguins, they ran through the Eastern Conference that year. I'll put that out there. They barely lost in those first 3 rounds. But when they played that Red Wings team, I think everyone realized, oh crap, we actually have a real opponent we're playing against. And this team is awesome. My opinion, that's the best team of the Cap era. It's not close.
Yeah, I fully agree. There's another team that I want to talk about that's a little bit too high, but also I can kind of understand why. Well, no, I can't understand why people have ranked them this low because they ranked other teams that did a similar thing way higher. The 2013 Blackhawks, who went, what was it? Was it 24 games losing in regulation?
The stat is there somewhere. Right. I know the Locked On Blackhawks. Yeah. 36-7-5 in 48 games, went on a 24-game point streak, 21-0-3.
Yeah, just truly bonkers.
They crushed everyone.
Won the cup. Did not make it look particularly difficult beyond that series against the Red Wings, where if the Blackhawks lose that series, I think that we don't talk, like, they blow that team up, you know? But just a wild season. They won the cup. They ran through basically every team to get there. Corey Crawford was outstanding. You've got Patrick Kane doing Patrick Kane things. Like Patrick Kane had 19 points in 23 games. You know, just truly bonkers stuff. Corey Crawford with a .932 save percentage they went 16-7-2. That's the first playoff series that I remember is that series against the Bruins. That's when I started watching hockey.
That was a good series. That was actually the Blackhawks. They beat them, but if you recall that game 6, that was up in Boston. The Bruins were close to sending that back for 7.
Oh yeah, they were. I mean, 16 seconds. You know, that's the thing, isn't it? 16 seconds away from it. But
I'm still salty. There was no Penguins Blackhawks series there because the Penguins got swept by the Bruins, and I wish we got to see Penguins Blackhawks when
fun.
All were in their primes. That would have been great, but that was still quite a fun final. The Bruins gave them as much of a fight as they could. The Blackhawks were just that much better.
Yeah. And I know the logic there that I'm thinking is that, well, they only played, what was it, a 48-game regular season. It doesn't count, like, it's a fake cup almost. You know, the arguments that you see a lot with the Tampa Bay teams that won the cup in the bubble, and then they won the COVID shortened, like the shortened season a year later. But yeah, they need to be way higher in my mind. Like that, I don't remember what my rankings were exactly because we did these last week, but like that was my top 3 was Kings, Red Wings, and Blackhawks. Not in that order necessarily. We'll take a quick break and then we're going to talk about some teams that were probably way too high on this list. So that should be interesting, and I'm sure won't make people really mad. First, though, we're going to talk about Birddogs because I'm wearing my Birddogs right now. I have been wearing them all day. I am super comfy. I am cool. They look great. They fit great. I can't say enough good things about Birddogs. I'd heard good things about them from other Locked On hosts. Didn't believe them. I was like, these shorts cannot be as comfortable as people are saying. You know, it's all hyperbole. It's not. These are the most comfortable shorts I've ever worn. And if you don't get them, you're going to regret it. Like, they're the most comfortable clothes I've ever worn. And I worked from home through the entire pandemic. I am an expert in comfy clothes. These shorts are the best. And so go to birddogs.com, get your own. If you enter promo code LOCKEDONNHL, you're going to get a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/LOCKEDONNHL or promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You're going to get a free white hat and you're going to be the comfiest person in the whole world. You're not going to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise. All right, we're back with Locked On NHL. I'm Jay Forster. This is Hunter Hodies. We are talking about cup winners, power rankings, who's too high, who's too low. We've gotten mad about people underrating teams. Now let's look at a couple of teams that are overrated. Let's start with the Vegas Golden Knights winning this year. One of the worst cup finals in recent memory for me.
I can see that. I will say Vegas beat up a lot of teams along the way. That series against Winnipeg was honestly not close. They beat the Oilers. It was so funny. Everyone picked the Oilers to win that series. I'm like, I think you all are underestimating Vegas pretty bad here. And sure enough, they go out there and beat them in 6 games. Western Conference Final was decent, but Vegas was still the better team. And then you're right. The Stanley Cup Final was not good, partly due to the Panthers being so banged up. Ekblad was hurt. Kachuk has a broken sternum, can't even play in the final game, basically. I can definitely see why people ranked them that high, but I personally would have them a little lower, in my opinion. Heck, we didn't even get to in the last segment, Jay. The 2016 Pittsburgh Penguins should not be number 4. They should be
an unreal team.
That team,
however,
steamrolled. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to make one point here. That was a very, very good team. They were a pain in the butt to play against. If Zach Werenski doesn't get hit in the face, that's a very different series.
It's the next year.
Is that the next year?
Yeah, 2017.
Oh, okay. Well, then I retract my point. The 2016 Penguins also beat us in the playoffs, I think.
No, that
we
was
didn't play them in the playoffs. I'm getting time is fake. Everyone disregard all of this. Yes, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the 2016 team, very, very good. Very annoying.
When Mike Sullivan took over, that team just went off. And down the stretch, it really all started in New Year's Eve of 2015 when I believe they went to Detroit. They crushed them. And I was like, okay, this feels a little different. And then from then on out, they just beat teams badly down the stretch of the season. They kicked the Rangers' butts in the first round after Lundqvist had just owned them the previous 2 years in the playoffs. They finally got that monkey off their back. They crushed the Capitals in the second round. The Lightning give them a pretty big fight because that was, if you remember, that was Andrei Vasilevsky's coming out party. I remember I was like, who the heck is this guy? And I was like, okay, finally realized.
Because they had just moved on from Ben Bishop because he was really good and really hurt in the 2015 playoffs. And then, they went from Ben Bishop, who I don't super rate as a goalie. I think his biggest skill was mostly large, but he was very good. So they went straight from Ben Bishop to Andrei Vasilevsky. And I'm like, this seems unfair. Surely there's supposed to be some kind of growing pains in between. But yeah, somehow, for me, I feel like this series, or this playoffs, beating the Capitals was the biggest thing. It felt like, it felt like that team had those two teams. I feel like have been each other's Achilles heels in and out in the same way that I think the Washington Capitals beating the Penguins in 2018 was that was okay. We've done that. Everything else is easy, that was, I'd forgotten how good that team was. I was thinking of the 2017 Penguins. The 2016 Penguins were even better. That team was looking at the roster now, like just unreal.
No, that team was better than the 2017 one. If you remember, 2017, they didn't even win the cup with Chris Letang playing. That's just they goalied their way to a cup that year, and they PDO'd their way to a cup that year. 2016.
So a fun fact about that: they beat the Sharks in the final. Obviously, Sidney Crosby still gets booed in San Jose. Penguins game, Sidney Crosby still gets booed, which is very funny to me, a person that I love Sidney Crosby, but I also love to boo Sidney Crosby. So that's a fun little aside, is that Sharks fans are still mad, and it's been 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I think, going to be like that. Looking at other teams on this list for a second, I do agree Vegas is a little too high. Colorado 2022, they got to come down a little bit. Not that much. That team was very good. Don't get me wrong. They also steamrolled everyone in the playoffs. They beat people want to say that Tampa Bay Lightning were tired in the final. Sure, but they still knocked their socks off. They absolutely crushed them. The 2020 Lightning, that team was really good. They were loaded, so I can understand that, though they had a pretty couple good series there. I believe one of them was against the Islanders in the bubble. The Islanders gave them one heck of a fight 2
Mhm.
years in a row, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And that final was against it was the Dallas Stars was the first one. The Montreal the second one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Montreal was 2021,
Yeah.
which was also a really bad
that final stunk. Yeah. The 2021 was good, though. Dallas gave them quite a good fight. I can understand ranking Tampa above a lot of teams because of how loaded they were, and they still are to this day. But I would still knock the 2022 Avalanche out of the number 1 spot, but I think I would still have them in that top 5, in my opinion.
Let's talk about the 2019 Blues, because somehow that series, the one against the Bruins, has just completely disappeared from my memory. And it wasn't that long ago. And the Blues, I feel like people call them frauds a lot. They were riding on a very good Jordan Binnington performance, and I'm looking at the roster, and I'm like, okay, they were reasonably loaded, but there wasn't like I feel like, oh, you know what? This was the time they were out of the playoffs by like January, and then they went on a massive tear, snuck in the 8th seed, and then just destroyed everyone. I feel like that was the Blues.
That was when Craig Berube he came in mid-season, I believe. I don't think he was not the head coach for that full season. I believe he was an interim at the time, and they just went into those playoffs. And for a team that had a lot of playoff heartbreak, man, their fans just went through it for all those previous years. It looked like they were going to go on some serious cup runs when the teams were even more loaded. This one, no one expected it. That series against the Stars, if you remember, was awesome.
Yes.
And then they have that final against the Bruins. That's probably one of the best cup finals of the last few years. They're just Game 7, especially with how the Blues were able to blow the socks off at TD Garden, to be honest. And, that team was also pretty good. You had Braden Shen there. You had Ryan O'Reilly, who was still the height of his power. You had Alex Pietrangelo before he went to Vegas to help win a Stanley Cup. Jordan Binnington, let's face it, that's why he makes all the money today, is because of how good he was in that final. He's not as good as he once was anymore, but he was electric for the Blues that year. And that team was really fun following that run. The city was so invested in it. They kicked so much butt. I would move them up at least a little bit. I think they're definitely underrated right now by a lot of the hosts.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like kind of the same thing for full disclosure, the 2011 Boston Bruins win is before my time, but I have heard some stories about that series. And that was the, oh God, who did they play?
2011 Bruins? Oh, that was
2011 Bruins. That was the
Vancouver Riot series.
That was the Vancouver Riot series. You're correct. Yes. So like I would put that up purely because it almost burned a city down, and I feel like it deserves. Like Vancouver was going to burn whether they win or lost. I think in the same way that like Philadelphia has to go out and grease the telephone poles every time the Phillies win a game. But yeah, that was. I don't know. I've heard a lot of stories about that series, insane. And I feel like that was the series. There was a lot of craziness in.
That 2011 final was awesome. Tim Thomas was on an unreal heater for the Bruins. They went down 0-2 to the Canucks. They come back. They storm back, I should say, win games 3 and 4 in Boston pretty handily. Game 5, Vancouver wins. They go up 3-2. You're thinking, oh, this is going to be it. The Canucks are going to win the cup. Nope, they lose Game 6, and then they just get blown out at home in Game 7, which obviously started the riots. And I was correct. Berube coached 63 games for the Blues during that 2018-19 season, so he was an interim coming in and then led them.
Yeah, they fired Mike Yeo, I believe.
Yes, right.
And they were in 31st place. Yes, because Vegas was there at the time. They were in 31st place on the 1st of January, and then won the cup. Like, it's a really good story. I just have somehow just all of that series, all of that playoffs has just vanished from my mind. I don't know why. But yeah, it's a really good story. I think, again, I would put that higher just because the narrative is fun. In the same way that, like, the 2012 Kings were the 8th seed and they snuck in and did a thing.
You can even make an argument for the 2018 Capitals. They come back from 2-0 down to the Blue Jackets. Mm-hmm. You remember that series quite well.
They win the third game in overtime. So what they did was they started with their backup goalie.
Right.
because Holtby wasn't getting it done, I guess, in the end of the regular season. So they start with a backup goalie, lose 2 games. Holtby comes in for the 3rd game. Caps win in overtime. I believe Lars Eller scores that overtime game-winning goal. They win the next 3 games straight, and then they get through Pittsburgh, their mortal enemies, and then it's
Tampa Bay
from there.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously, as someone who, you cover the Blue Jackets, I cover the Penguins, annoying run because they beat both of the teams that we cover. But, it was nice to see Ovechkin get that cup, but the way they went through that run, everyone didn't think it was going to happen. This comes after the Capitals were the best team in the league 2016, 2017. You look at the record that they had those 2 seasons in the regular season, they were the best team in the league. And they didn't get it done those 2 years. Everyone's like, nope, it's over. They come back, have a little bit of a down year in 2018, and then they just go through and win the Stanley Cup because that's just how it has to be. But I think that run doesn't get enough love from NHL fans, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you never think about. I think because there wasn't any big thing, it wasn't record breaking, and it wasn't insane, going 16-4 like the 2012 Kings. It was just, suddenly the Capitals have arrived, and they're just going to very quietly and very neatly just kind of take care of each team and win a cup. I'm glad Ovechkin gets at least 1 cup. I don't know that he's going to get another one based on what the Capitals are doing this offseason and have been doing for a couple of seasons now, but that is beside the point. We're not going to talk about Tom Wilson's brand new contract on this show. We're going to take a quick break, and then I thought we'd finish off with something a little bit different, and so after this, we're going to talk about favorite runners-up for the cup in just a second. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Nope, that's not correct. Welcome back to Locked On NHL. I'm Jay Forster. This is Hunter Hodies. And we have been talking about cup winning power rankings. But I thought we've talked a lot about who's too high, who's too low. So I'm posing Hunter a question now. Who do you think is the best team that made it to the final and didn't win the cup?
Wow. There
have been some good teams that got absolutely boned.
That's a good question.
I have an answer.
I mean, I'm biased, but that 2008 Penguins team was so good. That team, I'm sorry, they mowed through the league. They crushed everyone in the Eastern Conference. They beat that was the year after they got crushed by the Senators. They learned real quick what playoff hockey was all about. Beat the Senators. They beat the Rangers. They crushed the Flyers, go to their first final. And it just sucks that they went up against the wrong team at the wrong time. I think that is one of the best runner-ups of this cap era. I will also say that Bruins team that lost to the Blackhawks, that team was good.
Mm-hmm.
They kicked a lot of teams' butts that season and in the playoffs. They came back. Obviously, that comeback against the Maple Leafs. Everyone
loves the good. It was 3-1. Yeah,
it was 3-1. Yeah, everyone likes to come the jokes about that. They win their second round series. They sweep away a really good Penguins team. They give the Blackhawks one heck of a fight. They weren't able to win that series. I really liked that Bruins team. Those are just 2 that really jump out at me personally right now. I mean, heck, even the 2009 Red Wings team.
Yeah.
They brought back both those guys, and they added Marian Hossa.
I feel like both of those series could have gone. Marian Hossa could have 2 cups before 2010, very easily. If the Penguins had won the cup, he probably stays with the Penguins, and it goes from there. Which that would be I would love to see an alternate history, like a deep dive in what happens if Marian Hossa doesn't jump to the Red Wings and then to the Blackhawks. He stays with the Penguins if they win the cup, but that's beside the point. I also had the 2013 Bruins on my list. I also had the 2015 Tampa Bay Lightning on my list because the Blackhawks, in my mind, were lucky to win that series. Ben Bishop couldn't move. He just couldn't move. And I believe the Stanley Cup winning goal was scored because Victor Hedman skated into his own goalie, and then Patrick Sharp just took the puck and was like, well, I'm going to put this in the empty net. But if they've got a healthy goalie, that series it probably goes the other way because the Blackhawks were struggling. And they got really, really lucky, I think.
That was a fun series. I believe Tampa Bay was also up 2-1 in that series before the Blackhawks rattled off 3 straight wins, if I recall my history right.
So.
That was when the triplets line was really in high effect. Everyone, I think, remembers. If you've been
That was the
following hockey for a
beginning of
while.
the domination of the
Yes.
Lightning. I think that was like, and then you had obviously next year Vasilevsky arrives, and then they just go from strength to strength to strength. That was the series where I was like, oh, okay, we should pay attention to the Lightning because I don't know if the Blackhawks are going to get this done. And then Ben Bishop's playing with half a groin, and like that's the end of his career. Really, I think he struggled on for a couple more years in Dallas, but that was, I don't know, that was just a really good team. And I was watching that as a Blackhawks fan at the time, and I was like, man, I'm worried about this. I don't think they're going to get this done. And yeah, they got lucky. So I'm putting the 2015 Tampa Bay Lightning on my list for runners up. I might put the 2022 Tampa Bay on as runners up as well. That was a really fun final. But like you say, they played just so much hockey.
Yes, you think about it, right? And this goes back years. Got the Stanley Cup final 2015. You got 2016. They get to the conference final, miss the playoffs. Then you get to an Eastern Conference final the next year. You almost get back to the final. And then, obviously have the crazy upset by the Blue Jackets, which I know you remember very fondly. And then you win the Stanley Cup. Then you win the Cup again. And then
you're forgetting as well. So that the 2020 Stanley Cup was given out in August.
Right.
And then the season started again in January. And then they played through. And then they won the Cup again in July? So they won 2 cups in 11 months.
Right.
And then the season started again in October. Like those, I feel like people don't realize just how condensed the last kind of 3 seasons of hockey is. Like we're only literally, this was the first off season where everything is kind of back to schedule, and free agency was on 1st of July and the draft was on, the last weekend in June, as opposed to like, I feel like a couple of years ago, free agency was like July 24th because they were still trying to figure out how to get back from this crazy crunch. So like they played they played an entire playoff series plus a play-in series. They played a shortened season, which was 50-something games. Then they played another entire playoff series. Then they played a full 82-game season and then another full playoff run, like in the space of 22 months, 21 months. Just truly insane amount.
They played a lot of hockey, man. Yeah, I mean, this goes back to 2015. Those last 7-8 years, they played a ton of hockey. And it was bound to catch up. And you going up against an Avalanche team that boasts Nathan McKinnon, Gabe Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, and Cale Makar, Sam Girard. We can go on and on down the line.
Top to bottom studs. Like just a really, really
one of the deepest teams I've ever seen. And it was no
wonder.
And
I think people forget how good they were because they weren't as good this season. But then you look at who was missing this season. Gabe Landeskog probably gave his career to win that cup. I don't know if he's going to play again. They lost Mikko Rantanen. Oh no, Nate McKinnon was missing for a bunch of this season because he was injured. Like
they had a lot of injuries this year.
They had a lot of injuries. And again, people forget very quickly how good a team is because if they're bad the next season, people are like, oh well, they mustn't have been that good last season. It must have been a fluke without
right.
In the same way that I feel like because Vegas missed the playoffs. Obviously not this season, but I'm sure the season before, Vegas either missed the playoffs or just barely. And they missed the playoffs and then come on to win the cup the next season. And I think a lot of people weren't scared enough of the Golden Knights this season, I feel like. Because they were like, well, they missed the playoffs last season, so why would there be anything to be scared about this season?
And they got one heck of a head coach. They have a deep team. You had the biggest question was in goal, but that's when
somehow Aiden
Hill, comes out. Yeah, I mean Aiden Hill of all people.
That's a really fun story. I love when goalies come out of nowhere. Like we didn't mention the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes, but Cam Ward just kind of showing up as the baby and dragging that team to a Stanley Cup is a really fun story. So I think most of what we've discovered here is
a good Canes team. That was a good Canes team too.
Yeah, exactly. Rob Brind'Amour just mowing people down, doing what Rob Brind'Amour does, But I think what we've learned here is that we disagree with quite a lot of this power ranking that's come out. Sometimes, and that happens. Sometimes we agree with the other hosts, and sometimes the other hosts are incorrect. We can't help that. But let's finish off. Who's your pick for best cup winner?
Best cup winner. Yeah, I kind of said it early on. 2008 Red Wings.
Yeah,
They're
I agree.
the best team of the salary cap era. They had some of the best players in the league. They had the best defenseman on the planet at that time, even though he was a bit older. 2008 Red Wings are the best cup winner, in my opinion, followed by the 2016 Penguins.
Yes, I disagree with the Penguins. I'm gonna go ahead and go with, I think, the 2012 Kings for second place. But yeah, it's got to be the 2008 Red Wings. Like, you still hear people talk about that season and that team. Just a really great, well put together team that you don't see anymore. It's gonna be interesting to see how this season, I think, shapes out, because I think probably there's going to be a lot of teams that made the playoffs this season that don't make the playoffs next season. So we'll see how it goes. That's all for today. Tomorrow, Rachel and probably Nick, I think, will be coming to talk all about what is going on in the NHL. There's not a lot right now, but I'm sure they will find something fun to talk about. I've been Jay Forster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. I'm the host of Locked On Blue Jackets. This is Hunter Hodies. He's the host of Locked On Penguins. You can find him on Twitter at Hunter Hodies, HODIES. And we'll be back with you next Thursday to talk about more power rankings, or I don't know, maybe we'll do something fun. Maybe we'll put all of the mascots in a Royal Rumble and see what happens. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On NHL continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube, on Sirius XM, and we appreciate you, the everydayer, for showing up and being cool. So until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.